So you can't tell the story of the Broncos without talking about their free agent pickups of last offseason. We'll get into Bo Nix because there's plenty to talk about. But we got a little bit of news on Dre Greenlaw on Monday. Evan Engram is injured. Talanoa Hufanga was one of the best players on the field on Sunday. And J.K. Dobbins had a huge touchdown run. So we're going to kind of reset where things stand for the Broncos' Big Four free agent pickups as we dive into where things stand for them and much, much more on this edition of Denver Football After Dark. Crack one open with me. Denver Football After Dark on this, as I record this Tuesday morning, as we start this at midnight. Sure, a lot of you watch Monday Night Football. Watch the Minnesota Vikings come back. Tale of two games almost. Roaring back to beat the Chicago Bears. Fascinating game. Two young quarterbacks. J.J. McCarthy looking a little better late. That'll be a fascinating division to watch, of course, and it won't affect the Broncos much. The only team from the NFC North they see will be the Green Bay Packers, who looked to be the best of that quartet this weekend, and that we don't want to do too much off the Week 1 form, but that promises to be a formidable game when they come into December. But that's a long way off. Right now, it's about where the Broncos stand after 1 week. So, I wanted to start with the big four free agents that the Broncos brought in because, of course, it was a calculated gamble that the Broncos took on those guys. Calculated gamble on the health of Hufanga, Engram, Dobbins, and Greenlaw. Already one game lost. That was by Dre Greenlaw on Sunday. But Mike Shanahan, in the middle of answering a question on Hufanga, said he expected, Sean Payton said he expected Greenlaw back sooner rather than later. So that's promising. The question is sooner rather than later. Does that mean this game? Because it's pretty interesting on Greenlaw. Do you want to bring him back for a game on turf? The next two games, of course, are on turf for the Broncos at Lucas Oil Stadium and at SoFi Stadium against the Colts and Chargers. So that is something that you may think about. I mean, it's obviously not the same as it was back when they were playing on those old Brillo pads, but it is something that teams bear in mind, certainly with players to this day. I mean, we see sometimes the Broncos, when they go practice on the turf field in the field house, they are still mindful of players coming off of injuries when they do have field house practices. So it stands to reason they may be mindful of that with Dre Greenlaw as he comes back from the quad injury. So that is something to consider here. So bear that in mind as we see what happens with Dre Greenlaw this week. We hopefully will get some clarity Wednesday. And also note that one thing that we have seen from the Broncos in terms of how they bring players back from injury the last couple of years, they've shown a pattern of sometimes having 2-week ramp-ups for players, as in we'll see them start practicing one week and then return the following week. They've sometimes been very deliberate with players coming back. This certainly appears to be a good practice because, again, least injured team in football the last 2 years. You can't quibble with the results for this team in 2023 and 2024, especially considering where this team was before Sean Payton got here. So that is something in their favor, but we'll see. The other thing that may also come into play in terms of how they view this is how good Justin Sternad looked on Sunday. Probably his best game, certainly right up there with the game that he had against the New York Jets last year. That was the last time that he had a TFL and a sack in the same game. I think part of the reason why he flourished was a defense around him that was fully healthy, including having Alex Singleton next to him, but also including having Talanoa Hufanga behind him. Having Hufanga coming up and attacking all over the field, coming forward and attacking, I think that's something that helps out your inside linebackers tremendously. You trust that Hufanga is going to be there to take care of business and frees you up as an inside backer like Sternad and Singleton to be a little bit more aggressive. Hufanga, to go to him, you knew he was going to be impactful. And there were a couple of practices in particular during training camp where it became apparent to me that he was all the way back and all the way back to the form that he had pre-ACL injury. He was not at that level last year. But the degree to which he's back, I mean, and actually seeing it out there at full speed. This is the guy who, prior to that injury, looked like somebody who could have been in the DPOY conversation in 2023. That's how good he was. Somebody who easily, again, this is somebody who would not have been available on the market if he'd stayed healthy. 49ers would have probably locked him up at some point last year. I don't think there's any way they would have let him hit the market if he'd stayed healthy. The fact that he's here is because of the injury and then because he was injured again last year and missed some time. So it's a combination of injuries that led to Hufanga being here. And now the Broncos get to reap the rewards of a player who I think changes the possibilities, because now if you have Hufanga playing at this level and you have Surtain playing at his usual level, and Riley Moss had a terrific game on Sunday, obviously the Titans, they have some issues at wide receiver. But when you're talking about your cornerbacks as a collective allowing under 50 yards, I mean, just tremendous job. There was nowhere for those receivers to go. Of course, it certainly is helped by the fact that when the wide receivers were able to get some openings, for example, Calvin Ridley couldn't complete the catch, much to the chagrin of Cam Ward's family shown in the stands. So that the Titans, to go back to them for a minute, the Titans may need to rethink some things in terms of they need to rethink some things in terms of what they do in terms of their draft and what they do at wide receiver. 1 second real quick. Sorry. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. So, I got a notification. It's my own fault here. I had forgotten that I needed to have my laptop plugged in. And it was like, I got the notification. Your Mac will sleep soon unless plugged into a power outlet. And that would have been a problem, Broncos fans. That would have been a big disaster. There would have been no show. So, Cam Ward's family is not prepared for what the Titans organization can do to a career. Yeah, it's they don't seem to have alignment. Classic organization of not having GM, coach, quarterback alignment. But I do wonder. I mean, Jake, I think you make a good point. I've joked about this, but I say this maybe with a little bit of seriousness, that the way Vance Joseph was talking up Cam Ward last week at his press conference, he did sound like a man who wanted to coach Cam Ward at some point. That was a pretty eloquent dissection of his abilities. Pretty clear, pretty crisp. I heard that and I thought, man, that's good. That's really like that's perfect. That's a perfect case to make. It's Vance is very good at that, and yeah, he's. Pardon me. Wouldn't surprise me. The question I think would be, if VJ becomes a head coach next year, does he take somebody with him to call plays? I mean, I know somebody has brought this up. If VJ becomes a head coach in 2026, is Davis Webb his play caller? Or does Sean Payton say, maybe, well, you can go, but I'm not sure you want Davis I want Davis going to the same spot. Or is Davis Webb somebody's head coach? That's another thing to think about. But the other thing also in play is Sean Payton historically has not been one to stop his assistant coaches from going up the ladder. He is in the belief that it's a good problem to have, although he's joked that they had some coaches leave who he thought maybe they were another year away from leaving. Declan Doyle going to Chicago is a good example. He's with Chicago as a non-play calling offensive coordinator, tight ends coach last year. Declan is one whom that I think they thought they were going to have for another year, but he ended up moving on. And of course, John Morton went to Detroit as offensive coordinator to call plays. He's a veteran coach. It certainly helps that you have Pete Carmichael, who came over from New Orleans last year, and Pete can kind of handle some of that work as well, helping guide the offense, helping guide the passing game. So, and having Pete in the building certainly helps if you lose another offensive coach this offseason, because Pete, he's been with Sean Payton a long time and really understands what's trying to be done around there. But it's something. It's a problem. It's a good problem to have, but it's something the Broncos may face again this offseason if things go well, and especially if things go well on the defensive side. I know I got a question about this in the comments, and there were some comments I had to. There were briefly in there that got a little bit of profanity in there, so I quickly saw them in, took them out, but I hit delete a little bit too often. I think I deleted a few comments that I shouldn't have, and I apologize for that. So then I figured out today, by the way, that you can go through and you can find like in the administrator, you can find comments to have profanity in them, and you can take them out. So I'll be better at that next time. So. May saying that's the obvious. When they break the huddle with less than 18 to run, when they break with greater than 12, it's a pass. I'm a father of 4 other coordinators. I did not notice that. That is interesting. I should ask you, Michael, was that just yesterday, or have you noticed that in other games as well? That is because I say this: if you've noticed that, others will notice that. It's like I said a couple of years ago when there was a tell with Jaleel McLaughlin going in that it was a 70% chance that he was going to be the intended target, whether as a pass catcher or he was getting the handoff. So you'd see when Jaleel came in, everything was shade toward Jaleel getting the ball. And after That's a big part of why he became less effective as 2023 went on, because you'd see defenses moving over and following him. They knew that was going to happen. So that's why I say, if you've noticed that, because these teams have quality control coaches, they have younger assistants whose job it is to dissect the film and figure out little trends like that that would notice something like that. So last year too. Okay. That's really interesting. All right. I may actually go. You actually gave me a little project for tomorrow. I may just kind of go and check that out myself, and then give you a little tip of the cap here. See, this gives me ideas. Like I did the show on George Payton last week, and then after I did this show, I tapped out a column in 25 minutes about giving George Payton a contract extension, and that was, appreciated. Teams aren't scared of Denver's run game, don't respect it. Well, actually, there were a lot of, and I think there was a tweet about this sometime Sunday night, that Denver actually faced a lot of stacked boxes. So I think, if anything, teams were expecting Denver to run the ball. Maybe now some of that may be not respecting the deep ball game of the Broncos, but some of that may be expecting the run. So I don't think it's that they don't respect the run game. Frankly, I think they're expecting the Broncos to run a little bit cornbread. So I'm gonna sound like Bill Lumbergh here. I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with you there on that. You think Bo's slow start was because he took limited snaps in the preseason game and was rusty? No, because he also had the two joint practices as well, and I don't think rust is a huge thing. I think he just had a shaky. I think he just had a shaky day. I think some of that, frankly, some of it followed up from last year. I think it's sort of. I think of especially the first interception sort of looked a little bit like some of the interceptions that we saw down the stretch last year. So I don't think that's a cause of it. So Ronald Ortiz, how come we didn't get? That's something that surprised me, Ronald. That they weren't intentional about getting the ball to Marvin Mims Jr. in the way they were last year. That was the last 7 games of the season. Opening things up for him was the end arounds, putting him in the backfield, screens, and it vanished. It was part of the game plan. And it was almost like they replaced that with trying to inject Troy Franklin more. In terms of snaps, by the way, it went Sutton, Franklin, Mims. So if you go by raw snaps, it was Franklin by a nose over Mims in terms of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. And certainly in terms of use, it definitely was Franklin over Mims if you were going 1, 2, 3 in that first game. So Sean's long-winded play calling is leading to more delay of game penalties. Well, he's actually cut some of the verbiage out of the play calling this year, so you'd like to think that hopefully there'll be fewer of those. But the delay of game penalty coming off of the neutral zone infraction, so you had a delay of game coming off a dead ball. You should never have delay of game coming off a dead ball. Never, ever, 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 ever. That's inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable. So before we move on, before I got a little sidetracked with the comments, I want to go back to the free agents because I dove into Hufanga, dove into Greenlaw. Got to talk about Evan Engram because, of course, now we're going to wait on the status of his calf, of course, because he did leave with injury on Sunday. We don't have an update on that yet. Kind of just going to wait and see whether he's out there on Wednesday or not. Don't know the grade of the calf strain at this point. I don't think that's been out there at this point. So now we just wait and see. And the Broncos aren't. This isn't like the old days when have be a little bit more forthcoming with injuries. It's a little bit trickier to kind of dive into them. But I think anytime we're looking at soft tissue injuries, there's a concern. If it's like Malcolm Roach's injury, if it's grade 2, you're talking about 4 weeks, and you'd be talking about injured reserve stint. If Engram misses some time, all of a sudden you're going to be relying a lot on Lucas Kroll again, because he's, from the tight end position, he's the only one that can come close to replicating what Engram does. What I do actually think we'll see more of, if Engram does miss some time, I think we may end up seeing Pat Bryant in there more, and I think you may see some of those routes go to wide receivers rather than Engram. And I think you may end up, instead of seeing Engram, you may see more 4 wide receiver sets with one of the receivers kind of picking up the slack. So it may end up being more than 4 snaps, for example, for Pat Bryant. Kind of the domino effect ends up getting him on the field more. So that may be something to watch out for next week. The fact, yep. I think that's going to be a point of frustration for a lot of people. That they didn't get Engram. It goes back to the draft. And I think sort of another chance to talk about domino effect. Getting Jahdae Barron was great, and certainly he had a promising first game out there. And long term, I think you're going to be very happy having Jahdae Barron and with what he does for that defense. But Jahdae Barron, that's probably not really the plan. If they don't pick Barron, if he doesn't fall to 20, given how the board was looking, that's probably a trade down at that point. And then it's accumulate some more picks, and maybe you've got a little bit more capital on day 2 with which to work. There's probably still a cornerback coming in there, but if you've got more day 2 capital, and of course they did trade down as well. So what if you're talking about perhaps what if there's one more day 2 pick, or your combination of picks leads you to have, instead of having just the RJ Harvey selection in that 60 range, what if you've got another selection there right around the end of the mid to end of the second round or into the third round? What if you've got to pick middle of the second round and end of the second round? Okay. So for example, are you in the Elijah Arroyo conversation, the tight end who went to Seattle? Is it Arroyo and Harvey, perhaps? I mean, you're starting to get into a different mix, because they were still looking really heavily at tight ends in day 2. But it goes to also, and I mentioned this on the show yesterday, the must-haves, the needs, and the wants. When they got Engram, tight end in the draft went from a must-have to a need. If they hadn't gotten Engram, given what was left on the market, draft tight end would have been in that must-have conversation. Engram turned it from must-have to a need, as in, you still would like to get that, but you could probably get by, or maybe even a want, depending on how they classified it. And in other words, it moved down a little bit. They did get their young tight end in the draft, but it was Caleb Lohner, who is decidedly a developmental tight end, and they were willing to roll the dice on exposing him to waivers for a day. He passed through, and they brought him back. But they didn't feel about him the way they felt about Frank Crum the previous year. Frank Crum, they were not willing to exposed to waivers, but they were willing to expose Caleb Lohner this year. So personally, I think Sean Payton has made way more faith in Kroll and Troutman. Now Troutman's a different type of tight end. Okay, so Engram is your tight end in space, and Troutman is your inline tight end. Troutman and Engram are basically different positions, really. They both play tight end, but they have different sets of responsibilities. I think you can almost ignore the depth chart. There's only one spot listed for tight end on the depth chart that they put out in the media release every week, but you almost want to I think you sort of ignore that because effectively Engram is you should almost list like Joker as a position and then inline tight end as a position. Because for the inline role, Adam Troutman is your first teamer. For all intents and purposes, Adam Troutman is still a first teamer on this club at traditional inline tight end. So, anyway, Craig Hart, Kenyon Sadiq is a future Bronco. Hey, that's my guy. That's the guy I like. He'd make a lot of sense. Would not stop. The stop. Oh yeah, that's some awkward timing. Not on the same. Like nothing about that was right. Like, Bo's he's flat-footed, so the throw and the delivery and the footwork, that's off. He's yelling at Kroll, stop. So Kroll's off on that as well. Like, it's one of those plays where, like, okay, who's responsible? What's wrong? It's kind of both ends of the play, right? It's just, and it seemed like there was a bunch of that yesterday where it's like, okay, what's going on here? The strip sack fumble. I mean, obviously, Jeffrey Simmons, gets past Powers, but Powers holds off Simmons for 3+ seconds. Okay. So like Powers, he's taking care of Simmons for a good while, what should be long enough to allow the play to develop. So that's why if people are wondering, well, why isn't Ben Powers credited with a sack on that by Pro Football Focus? PFF is looking at that and saying that Powers is holding Simmons off to a point in terms of time where that ends up becoming on Bo in terms of holding it and then moving around and then kind of moving into what becomes a strip sack fumble. I know, like when I put the PFF pressure stat out there, their total pressures, they had 6, 3 hits and 3 hurries credited to the pass blocking, which was second best in the league behind Arizona, and people were a little bit up in arms about that. So I just kind of want to explain where they get their methodology, where they get that number from, and why they would not put that on Powers, and why they would attribute that to the quarterback rather than to the protection in the end. So, anyhow, thanks for not making excuses for Bo. I mean, hey, Bo wasn't making excuses for himself either. I mean, listen to him talking about the strip sack fumble. He's saying he's got to hold it with both hands. I mean, I'm only reflecting here what the man himself is saying too. That he was putting that on himself. So I think something is that. I'll say this, Jake, I'm not a fan of their grades. I'm a fan of their data. I don't like their final grades, and I tend to stay away. I usually stay away from their grades, but I use their data a lot. So I use things like offensive and defensive side. I use their, pressure rate, drops, times targeted, catches allowed versus targets, yards allowed when targeted, that sort of thing. That, Jake, has a lot of value, and they keep data on that. I mean, I use their data on punters because they keep hang time data. That's so I can't do 32 teams, 32 punters of hang time. I don't have time. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go watch 32 teams of punters when I'm covering this team. But I can go and I can get that from PFF. So I'm thankful that they keep that sort of thing so I can go and use that in my own charts. So anyway, so that's, I think Sean loses ego and runs the ball. It's not so much ego. I think it's just he gets in the moment, and I think sometimes coaches get a little impatient. They want to get out of it. I'll tell you a story here. And this is back in 2014. Y'all, this is Broncos at St. Louis Rams. It was a bad day for the Broncos. They go to St. Louis and they get beat. If you recall, there were some injuries that game. I think Emmanuel Sanders got hurt. Peyton's off. It's actually that November of 2014 when was really what the first sign of Peyton starting to decline. Well, as the game gets away from the Broncos, things get ridiculous in terms of run-pass ratio, and it's not like the Broncos were that far behind. It's 13-7 at halftime, and I just went and looked it up here. It doesn't get to be a two-score game until 141 is left in the third quarter when Zerline hits a field goal. Then it becomes 16-7. But even then, 16-7, we're not talking about this thing being far away. But even that two-score game, maybe that's when you think about going a little bit more pass heavy, right? But Denver runs 66 plays, and only 10 of them are rushes. And I'm just looking this up here real quick. Now, obviously, you're going to have an imbalance in the fourth quarter when you're coming back, when you're trying to come back. And looking this up here, the Broncos did not have a single run play in the fourth quarter of this game. And as I'm looking this up here, they have 1, 2, 3, 4. It's always great when I count on air. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. All right, 19. Okay. So, anyway. So, they got 66 total plays. And they've got 10 runs and 56 passes. But in the first three quarters, when it's a one-score, it's the Broncos fall behind 10-0, 13-0, but they're still within two scores early, and then it's 13-7. So two scores in the first half, that's nothing. You can still do everything. And then it's 13-7 at halftime, and it's 13-7 in third quarter. So not once in the game until the fourth quarter are the Broncos in a situation where you can say, okay, you've got to pass the ball more. All right? So the first three quarters, they run 47 plays, and 10 of them are runs. 37 pass plays, 10 runs. So the next day, I bump into Adam Gase, the offensive coordinator, and he's mortified, like he's apologetic. I think he's apologizing to everybody. He apologizes to me, and I'm like, Goose, like that, don't worry about it. Like he's like, it got away from me. Like, and he starts explaining, like he said, like you get in the moment and you try. What happens is sometimes you get a little excited and you're trying to whether when things aren't going well, you're trying to get it all back in one shot. And sometimes as a play caller, you lose your patience a bit and you're trying to force it. And you're like, I've got this play. And usually it's a pass play. It's like, because runs, sometimes you can have it perfectly done, but often a perfectly called run play is still going to be 7 or 8 yards. Like the RJ Harvey play yesterday when he goes 50. To go 50, he's still got to make a man miss. If he doesn't make the guy miss, it's a nice, solid gain, but it's not the backbreaker. But he does make a man miss, and he takes off. But if he doesn't, it's a solid gain. Everyone's happy. It's you move the chains and you go forward. But a pass play, boy, like if you work on that in practice and you get it, the pass is on target. I mean, that's 20, that can be like 25 like that. And play callers, play designers like that. That's especially someone like Gase working with Peyton Manning or someone like Sean Payton, like that gets them going. That gets their blood pumping. So I think it's sort of almost like a human nature thing for play callers. And sometimes it just kind of gets away from them and they get this notion of, all right, I got to get it back. We're struggling. It's not going well. I got to get it back right now. And it's hard to be patient and really getting the run going. It can require patience because sometimes getting that going, it might require a possession or two where, okay, maybe you end up getting a first down, but maybe you get a first down, but your next series of downs, it's a 2-yard run, it's a 5-yard run, and then it's 3rd and 5, and perhaps, okay, it doesn't work out. Your deep options are covered. You take the underneath, and it's 3 yards, and you have to punt. But the thing is, this team has a luxury here. And the luxury is that defense. As Mike McGlinchey said, thank God for the defense. That defense gives you the luxury of patience. And that defense is going to give you the luxury of being patient to stick with the run and establish it and keep jabbing early, even when those jabs are only getting 3, 2, 3. Because, hey, look, if you can have those if you can have those jabs be 3 yards early, that can still keep you on schedule. That can help. Now, the other key is you can't have things like a delay of game coming off of a dead ball foul. See, I'm not a fan of the team, and I'm not really, the fandom of like a specific team is kind of out of me. I love my years as a Bucks fan growing up, but it's kind of hard for me. You cover the game for so long, you kind of don't have the same like rooting interest as you did. But I enjoy the game, and I'm a fan of good, crisp football. I'm a fan of watching great execution. And so I'm not a fan of seeing things like a delay of game coming out of a dead ball foul. That sort of thing bothers me. Bad game management like Brian Callahan at the end of the first half. I was aghast at that. Like these sorts of things are like, if what grinds my gears watching a game, especially at this level, at the professional level, is stuff like that. That's what really gets me. Jake Jabs. Mace's a football snob. Yeah, believe me. It is sometimes when I go watch college on Saturday and then watch pro on Sunday, I have to I admit I have to adjust my eyes a little bit. College is more, college is about the pageantry and the passion and all that. 2020, the year that was obviously without a lot of fans in the stands, it really hit me how much of the appeal of college football was about all the other stuff around it. The pageantry, the pomp, the bands, the reactions of the fans, like the crowd shots. Like when you watch, part of watching an SEC game, for example, is the almost like the emotional overreaction of like the students. Like that's part of the presentation. I was watching the USF Florida game on Saturday, and I very much enjoyed that, having attended South Florida and my niece being in the marching band down there, and like seeing part of the deliciousness of it for me, I'll admit, was seeing the way that the Florida fans were just shocked at how these unranked bulls from the American Athletic Conference were coming in and just stopping their beloved Gator offense cold, possession after possession after possession. But that's, and that's what was missing in the COVID year. You didn't have that same pump. I think it was like I was watching a North Carolina Wake Forest game, and there were point, but you're realizing, boy, the defensive execution is kind of a mess here, and it's kind of a hard game to watch. And then I'm realizing, oh yeah, it's because I'm not seeing I'm not seeing the fans in the stands, and I'm not hearing the band, playing after every first down, and I'm not seeing, and it's like you really realize how much of that is a part of the college football experience and how. So anyway, so that's my thing. So yes, I am a football snob. Oh God, yes. The band was too loud. Yeah, the other thing is they limited the band seats for the visiting band for this game. Like usually they're supposed to let the entire band from an in-state school come. Like the entire Florida State band would go when Florida State plays them, but they didn't let the entire USF band come. So my niece, being a freshman, couldn't go, and she was really ticked about that. And I was disappointed. So as far as I'm concerned, the USF beating UF was karma. So next week in Miami, they'll get it right because the entire USF band will go down for that game. That's the way it should be. So anyway, probably more that you should know. So anyway, so what made you choose Denver? What made me choose Denver was in 2002, I got a job with the Broncos on their website back then. So I didn't so much choose Denver as that was where the job was at that time, and I moved to Denver. So, and actually, I can say this for most of the media covering the Broncos. I mean, I'm just thinking about the beat reporters covering the Broncos. Almost all of them are not from here. I mean, I'm thinking like, let's see, I know Nick Kosmider's not from here, and I know of the Athletic, Jeff Legwold, he was covering the Titans for a while in Tennessee, and then he came here, and I know Parker Gabriel, the Denver Post, was covering Nebraska, and he's from Wisconsin, and I know Luke Evans now from the Post, he's from California. Like basically, like I'm sure you read and follow a lot of reporters who are on this beat, and I mean, Troy Rank, a columnist from the Post, grew up in Pueblo, so he's a Coloradan through and through. But and then Vic Lombardi over at Altitude is very proud of being from the North Side. And by the way, got to give him all sorts of best wishes here. He's taking some time off because, unfortunately, he's dealing with prostate cancer, as he revealed on his social media on Sunday. So I hope all of you are going to keep Vic in your thoughts right now as he deals with that. That's that's really tough. But I mean, I'm thinking of him, and I hope y'all think of him as well. But yeah, most of the reporters covering your Denver Broncos, not all, but most, are from somewhere else. I know, I think Zach Stevens of DMVR is from around here, and I mentioned Troy. And I know Cody Rourke of Mile High is from Grand Junction, but Most are not from Colorado. Most of us came here because this is where the work it was. And it's kind of as simple as that. So what about James? James Marilette's from here. So he's from Denver as well. So any of y'all scared about Daniel Jones this week? Okay. So Daniel Jones, good old Danny Dimes. We're going to get into him a little bit this week. The last time we saw Daniel Jones play a full season, remember, it ended in the postseason for the New York Giants. And it ended with a postseason win at Minnesota. So part of it for Jones is going to be playing within himself and within his skills. He's got some good players in his supporting cast. It's a good roster in terms of skill talent. The Colts have a good roster, period, except for quarterback. It's the conundrum of Chris Ballard, their general manager, is that he's pretty good at cobbling together a roster around a quarterback, but has not figured this out at all. Anthony Richardson, incredibly raw when they picked him, and at this point it's a miscalculation. Although the thing with Anthony Richardson is, if you were going to maximize him, you need to be very patient with his development. Frankly, either you need to put him out there and ride him and ride it out through all the bumps that were going to come because of how he's incredibly skilled but incredibly unrefined. And I mean, all you get to do is watch the tape of him at Florida. I mean, I mentioned the Florida USF game 3 days ago. I remember the game he played against USF in 22 and how all over the place he was that game. And I mean, you'd see the lasers, but then you'd see, it's like watching Nuke and Loosh in Bull Durham. Like, and there's, after his game, the manager and Robert Wool as the coach, they're sitting around. He's like, he walked 18, new league record, also struck out 18, another new league record. He also hit the mascot. That's Anthony Richardson in college. Like, he would be the equivalent of a pitcher who walked 18 and struck out 18. Like, you don't know where the ball's going to go, but when it goes where it's supposed to, it's perfect. The Colts need to be patient with that, or they, in terms of putting him on the field, or they need to say, hey, we're going to develop him and we're going to play the long game, and he's going to sit and watch for a couple of years. We're going to do an old school development with him. We're going to do what the Oilers back in the day did with Steve McNair. The first 2 years the Oilers had Steve McNair, when they were still in Houston, they gave him a couple of games at the end of the 95 and 96 seasons. And that was it. The rest of the time he sat. He didn't become the full-time starter until 1997, his third year. And when he did, he was ready. He had a promising first season, took even more steps in 98, his second season as starter, his fourth season in the league. So think about that, how patient they had to be. And then by 99, third season as starter, fifth season in the league, legitimately one of the best quarterbacks in football, and they go to the Super Bowl. That's the sort of patience that the Colts need to have with Anthony Richardson. Either put him out there immediately, and he did get injured, but put him out there and live with the bumps, or sit him and just let him gestate and let him develop and work with him in practice day after day after day. And they didn't do either. When they put him out there last year, they yanked him. That's just, it's malpractice how they've handled Anthony Richardson. But now they're playing Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones' success equation, it has to look a lot like it did with the Giants in 2022. 15 touchdowns, 5 picks. It's minimizing mistakes, playing with it himself, taking advantage of the talent that he has at the skill positions. And ultimately, it's an offense that will go as far as Jonathan Taylor goes. And that's appropriate to say because last year, when it turned for them in that game, was when Jonathan Taylor, a very smart person, did something incredibly dumb by dropping the ball right before he crossed the goal line in Denver. So we've talked a lot about that. It's a moment that haunts the Colts. And if you think he's not thinking about that they're not thinking about that what's going through their mind is, if not for that, we would have been a playoff team, well, you're wrong. That is something that is on their mind this week. That is going to be one motivated team that the Broncos are going to see on Sunday afternoon. Broncos had better be ready because that team is going to be ready. AR needs a change of scenery. Yeah, it's probably going to have to happen somewhere else for him. Probably somewhere else. And then that team will need to be patient with him. It may well be hitting the reset button and giving a couple of years on the bench and coaching him and guiding him and then reaping the rewards. Because there is talent, no doubt. There's talent, and there's talent and there's intelligence. He's got, he can process, he can do all that. But you got it, And look, let's just take Baker Mayfield, for example. Once he got to Tampa Bay, first of all, the Rams resuscitated him after Cleveland, and then Carolina let him go. And the Rams very quickly, Sean McVay showed everybody, hey, Baker still got it. The Broncos found that out firsthand on Christmas Day in 2022, and the Bucs signed him for a song in 2023, and he's been golden for them ever since. But of course, Baker had done much better than Anthony Richardson has done in Indianapolis, so it's a different type of example, but certainly it shows that when you have that next act, it can be there. But you're going to have to be patient with him, and you're going to have to kind of start it all over again. But another example, Geno Smith, who was decidedly unimpressive early with the New York Jets, and it took a long time, and he took a winding road as a backup for many years, and then eventually down the line when he got his shot, I think it surprised all of us. And now Geno Smith, he's legitimately in that second tier of quarterbacks. The guys that are pretty good, that if you've got a supporting cast around him, you can do some good things. And there you go. So, bust quarterback. He'll be a bust in Indianapolis, it would appear. But I'm not willing to say career bust just yet. I'm not closing the door on him. But I'd like to see him go to a place that's going to be more holistic with his development and show the necessary patience. And I think that patience will require just putting him on the bench and letting him slowly develop and rebuilding him. Geno is good. I don't get why people hate him. And he's proved himself. Give him credit. I was one of the doubters. I'm not a doubter anymore on Geno. AR would fit in with Ben Johnson. The Lions look lost after Ben left. Let's see. Let's give it a little more time, but that was not a good first impression the Lions put in on Sunday in Green Bay. People asking coming up when the game is. It's a late game in Indianapolis. It is a 2:25 or it's a 2:05 p.m. Mountain Time start, 4:05 Eastern Time at Lucas Oil Stadium. So I'm actually a little bummed it's a late start because it's going to be a late night on the Eastern Time Zone, but it is what it is. So yeah, 1:05 Pacific, 2:05 Mountain, 4:05 Eastern Time. So my man Crawshaw was respectable. More than respectable. It was terrific. 3 punts, 3 inside the 20. Nice gross average as well. The hang times were all well north of mid to upper 4 seconds. As I said, he understood the assignment and he succeeded at it. More games like this, and Broncos are gonna be pretty happy with what he did. So it's part of why you give the special teams a C, because Crawshaw was an A, and Marvin Mims Jr. had some A returns, but then you had the muff, and then you had the kickoff at the end of the first half. In defense of Sean Payton, 16 seconds left in the half. If you do kick a touchback, what they're thinking, I was going to ask about it, but they cut off the questions, even though there were 4 questions left, including mine. And they said, that's all the questions we have. Like, no, there were more questions left, but I digress. I was going to ask about the kickoff. In the Broncos' defense, 16 seconds, 35 at the 35-yard line, you're thinking, okay, probably 2 passes get him in the field goal range. What they were thinking, I would imagine, is if you place it down there at the 5, the time it would take for a return, even to 35-yard line, what they're thinking is, okay, if we can get this thing stopped at the 35-yard line, that return takes 6 to 8 seconds. So we get him stopped, we would have him, the coaches are saying to the players, all right, we get him stopped, it's a 35-yard line, they're taking over at 10 seconds or 8 seconds rather than 16 seconds. You're taking a calculated risk. It should work out, the cover, but the gap in the coverage showed it didn't. If you have it covered right, it works out. But they didn't have it covered right, so it burned them. So that is what I would say about that. They just basically, they took a chance and they got burned, and 3 points were on the board. So, okay. Yeah, Hufanga. The thing, Hufanga, he's a guided missile. I think that's part of what helped Justin Sternad had a good game, because if you have Hufanga providing run support from the back end, it frees up the inside backers to do a little bit more as well. Last year, you're not getting quite as much support. With all respect to PJ Locke, he's not quite the guided missile, reading things as quickly and attacking in the way that Hufanga can. Hufanga's special. When he's on his game, he's a special safety. And again, all respect to PJ Locke, but he's not in Hufanga's class when Hufanga's healthy. So that's just something that you have to account for. Sternad with a terrific game, by the way. Singleton, it'll help. Yes. Yes, when Sternad has more support, he can attack and be more aggressive. And I think you get to kind of see the best of him out there, between Singleton next to him instead of Barton, and Hufanga attacking from the back end. Sternad can be a bit more aggressive. He's good going in a straight line because he's got some speed to him. And then he's effective, and that's why you see, for the first time since the Jets game last year, he has a sack and he has a TFL. He's a playmaking linebacker when he gets those chances. So, almost forgot was like to have a run game. Stick with the run. It looked good late. Didn't look good early. Looked good late. The last taste in my mouth is what gives me optimism. Sometimes it's just the final impression. I feel like for some people the first impression is what's lingering, but I'm kind of more focused on the final impression. You notice the Chiefs games against winning teams are at home and the more favorable matchups are on the road. No, okay, Mario, stop right here, okay? Where the games are, it's determined by a preset rotation. Okay? So it was adjusted back around like 2018 through 2012 to adjust for how many times East Coast teams went west when they played the Western divisions, the NFC West, AFC West. But this particular arrangement where for example, the Broncos, they're scheduled to play at Philadelphia, at Washington, and the Cowboys and Giants at home. This specific arrangement that has been in place in 09, 17, and 25. That is every 8 years that you have that combination of road games against the NFC East. And Kansas City has the same combination, has their combination of road games against the NFC East. It's the same in 09, it's the same in 17, it's the same in 25. They get that combination every 8 years. Similarly, the Broncos, they're paired with the AFC South. And so, of course, they've got Tennessee at home and Jacksonville at home, and they're at Houston and they're at Indianapolis. The rest of the AFC West plays the AFC South. The entire AFC West plays the AFC South. Each team's combination of games, home and away, is the same every 6 years. So, like, they'll play the AFC South in 2028, but it'll be the reverse of what it is now. So, like the NFC East, the Broncos play the AFC West play the NFC East every 4 years. But in 2029, the home games will be the reverse of what they are this year. So in 2029, Philadelphia and Washington come here, and the Broncos will go to the Giants and to the Cowboys, the reverse of this year. So you play each division every 4 years, but in the NFC, but it reverses. In the AFC, you play each division every 3 years, but it reverses in terms of who you play at home and away. And then you have 3 other games that are determined by your place in the division. So this year, for example, the Broncos play a team from the AFC East. The entire AFC West plays a team from the AFC East on the road, and it corresponds to their place in the division last year. So the Broncos would play at the Jets, but the game's not going to be in New York. It's going to be in London instead. So the Chiefs will play at Buffalo. Every team in the AFC West will have a home game against the corresponding team from the AFC North. So the Broncos play the third place team from the AFC North. That's last year. That's the Bengals, but the game is here. And thus, the Chiefs will play the first place team from the AFC North at Arrowhead. That's Baltimore. And then the final piece for the AFC West is everybody in the AFC West gets a home game against the corresponding team in their place last year from the NFC North. So, the Chiefs get a home game against Detroit. The Broncos get a home game against third place Green Bay. The Chargers get a home game against second place Minnesota from last year. So, Mario, respectfully, nobody who made the schedule did it to favor the Chiefs. There is no favoritism going on. It is just how the rotation worked. There's no frickin' conspiracy on it. It is just the rotation. Sorry about that. I get fired up, but I hate when people start saying there's some kind of schedule conspiracy working for the Chiefs and against the Broncos. There isn't. And and also when it comes to how the games are structured, it's literally spit out by a computer. Now, what happens is they put all the variables in terms of what teams have requested in, and then variables that include things like no team can have more than 3 games in a row on the road. No team can have more than 3 games in a row at home. Every team has to close the season with a divisional opponent. Teams can request certain weeks to be on the road because of things like stadium availability. Like if you've got a stadium that's hosting a concert, you have to be on the road a certain week. In Kansas City, for example, they can't have a home game on the same day as a Kansas City Royals game because they share a parking lot. So and the Royals get the dates first because the baseball schedule is set the previous September. Like if we know the Rockies schedule for next year already, but that doesn't affect the Broncos. But the Kansas City Royals schedule affects the Chiefs. And so you already know that if there's a Royals game on a Monday or a Sunday or a Thursday, that there can't be a game unless it's moved. Because you remember back in 2013, the Ravens were coming off the Super Bowl win the previous year. So they should have hosted Thursday Night Football to open the season, but they could not because the Baltimore Orioles, who share parking facilities with the Ravens, the stadiums are close by in downtown Baltimore, they refused to move their game on that Thursday night, and thus for the Ravens to play on Thursday Night Football, it had to be a road game, and thus it was here in Denver, and Peyton Manning threw 7 touchdown passes and launched his record-breaking season. So they have all these variables that are plugged into the computer, and then they spit it out, and then the computer spits it out in terms of the order of the games. And then they go to work. And then they go to work in terms of like, okay, this. Now, the one thing they do sometimes spit in is saying, okay, we've got an idea that we want X game on Thanksgiving, X game on Christmas, that sort of deal. And so they work with those variables too. Like, you know, the Lions are going to have a home game on Thanksgiving Day and so forth. And that you also know that there may be a team that plays on Thanksgiving that has a game the following Thursday, and so forth. And so you've got all these things that you work with. And so they take all these variables, they plug them in, and then they come out with it. And then they come out with a schedule that works, and presto. So there is no, I hate to disappoint you. I know it wasn't made to tick me off, but I just get a little riled up on that. Like, sorry. Like I didn't, it just gets, the notion of conspiracy on that. It gets fun. It's just funny. It's one of those things that's sort of like, no, there isn't a conspiracy. Oh man. Miss Josie Jewell, someone says, yeah, I get asked this a lot. Could the Broncos bring him back? He's not coming back in all likelihood. And he's dealing with after effects of concussions right now. That was why the Panthers released him. And if he does get better and does return, it's more than likely he goes back to Carolina rather than coming back here. So just bear that in mind as well. Remember when we played... Okay. Oh, Michael, I'll tell you about that. Back in those days, until 1995, when the NFL went to 30 and had 5 teams in each division, when the Carolina Panthers and Jacksonville Jaguars came in, when the NFL was at 28 teams and on a 16-game schedule from 78 through 94, what it would do was if you finished in 5th place in any of the divisions that had 5 teams, so that was the NFC Central, the NFC East, the AFC West, and the AFC East. If you finished in 5th place, you would play the 5th place team in your conference, the other 5th place team from the previous year, twice. And instead of getting 4 games against the opposite conference, you'd get 2. So, like usually you'd play 4 games against a corresponding division from the opposite conference, but if you finished in 5th place, you only got 2 games against the opposite conference, and those were against the 2 5th place teams from the opposite conference, and then you played 2 more games against the fifth place team from your conference. I knew this because I was in Tampa Bay at the time, and the Bucks finished in fifth place a lot. So it's like, why are they playing the Cardinals twice a year again? Well, it's because the Cardinals are crap and the Bucks are crap, and so they're both in fifth place again, and so we have to play them again. Got very familiar with that over the years. That happened like I think it happened like 3 times in about a 7-year span. Like, why the Cardinals again? Well, it's because they both sucked. So, but the Broncos didn't suck very often. That's why it didn't happen. But in 1991, facing the Dick McPherson Patriots, Dick McPherson, of course, a former Broncos assistant who coached the Patriots right after being the head coach at Syracuse. One promising year, 6-10, after the Pats had gone 1-15, and then 2-14 the following year. He missed some time that season with diverticulitis, and then the Patriots got rid of him and hired Bill Parcells and drafted Drew Bledsoe. That was kind of the beginning of the Patriots as we know them ever since, when Bill Parcells became their coach. He became their coach. They changed their logo. Not long after that, Robert Kraft became the owner. Kind of the new Patriots basically began the moment Bill Parcells walked in the door. Because Parcells, a few years later, after Bill Belichick got fired, brought Bill Belichick on the staff. So Bill Belichick met Robert Kraft. Parcells left for the Jets, took Belichick with him, but they'd established a relationship. And so a few years later, after Parcells left the Jets, and then Belichick was going to be the Jets head coach, but that lasted a day with the infamous note, "I resign as HC of the NYJ." And then there was the trade between the Jets and the Patriots, and the Patriots trade for Belichick, and he reunited with Bob Kraft, and then you all know what happened next. So, and now the Patriots are led by Mike Vrabel, who played a lot of years for Bill Belichick. I mean, and Belichick, of course, coached under Parcells for a long time. So that's why basically the Patriots, as you know them, started the day Bill Parcells walked in the door. Am I a fan of the creamsicle Bucks jerseys? Well, there's a lot of nostalgia of them for me. I mean, I've got some gear because it's nostalgia. It's part of my past. It takes me back to going to games with my dad or my mom or my brother when I was in my tween years and my teen years. So there's a lot of fond memories there. But I like seeing them on occasion. I'm glad they're not the primary look. It's good to see them 1 or 2 times a year because it's cool. I'm glad that their primary colors are red and pewter. I don't need to see them more than occasionally. And in fact, I like it being special occasion that they bust out the old school, a couple of times a year. I don't want them to be the primary look. There's a lot more success associated with the current colors that they have. And there were a lot of reasons why they changed to red and pewter and why they changed to having the logo with the red flag and the sword. It was designed to turn the page after many years of failure. The orange uniforms did symbolize failure for that team. So that's kind of why I get it. And I think you can, even though the Broncos had a lot of wins with the D and a lot of wins with the old orange and the blue and the lighter blue helmets, to some people they symbolize Super Bowl failure too. So I kind of get that same feeling here as well, why you'd say, okay, keep the throwbacks as kind of a special occasion thing and have the current helmet being what it is. But I would also argue there's a lot more success because the Broncos did go to the Super Bowl 4 times in those, and they won 4 AFC titles, and they won a lot of games. The Bucks really did lose a heck of a lot of games in those things. when they changed uniforms, they'd had 14 straight losing seasons. I mean, there was an 0-14 season in those things. Like it, I mean, it was really, really bad. you know, I mean, it was bad around here for the Broncos with 7 straight losing seasons. Well, double that in Tampa Bay, which wasn't very long after they started the franchise going 0-26. So that's, is it true Belichick won't allow Patriot staff at UNC? Yes. And I don't know if any of y'all saw the answer that he gave rationalizing it, that he said, well, they won't let me around their building, so I won't let them around their building. Well, he's basically not letting, it sounds like he's not letting any scouts around Carolina right now, which I think is a mistake. I always think it's a mistake for college teams to not let scouts and NFL personnel around, because ultimately, if you want to run a quality college program, it should be about being very open to NFL personnel being there, because you want to create an environment where you help your players have the best possible chance of getting to the next level, of being successful, continuing their football lives and their football careers if that's what they see fit to do. Ultimately, the goal of college is to best set your students, your student athletes up for what they want to do beyond that, whether it's play football or go on with what Chuck Noll would call your life's work. So for players who want to make football their life's work, it helps to have NFL people in the building and helps to allow them to be around and get to know your players. So I don't like that. I don't like what Belichick's doing. He's got to, he's being petty about it. And he's got to let that go for the sake of his players. Now, I also think there may be some paranoia of saying, well, if I let them in, maybe he wants to go. My hypothesis is that maybe he wants to eventually go back to the NFL, and if he lets scouts in the building and they watch practices and whatnot, they go funnel it back to their teams and it be intel and all that. But he can't think about that. He is a college head coach running a college program. And when you're a college head coach, ultimately, you're trying to win games, but you also have a responsibility. You are an educator. That is, your job is to not only coach, but your job is to help these players, these students, they're all college students. Your job is to help prepare them for the next step in life. You are a coach, but you are working for the university, which means you're an educator too. That's part of your job, Bill. And is to help them with whatever their next step in life will be, to help prepare them for whatever their next step in life is, whether it's football or something else. And for those for whom the next step is football, this isn't helping them. So shame on you for doing that. Boy, I'm getting worked up tonight. This isn't a normal relaxed after dark. This is like, don't know why that is. Is there a there with the 2003 Super Bowl being rigged? No. There's not a there. What is there is you had John Gruden coming over from the Raiders to the Bucs, leaving behind Bill Callahan, leaving behind a playbook, leaving behind everything they do, and knowing Raiders' tendencies, knowing their plays, knowing their tactics, and the Bucs being uber prepared because the Raiders had not changed much about what they were doing, and Gruden knowing all that, and the Bucs defense having that intel from Gruden passed along to Monty Kiffin, their late defensive coordinator, and John Lynch has said it was like they knew exactly what was coming. There's no conspiracy there. That was just That was the Raiders not changing very much after Gruden left. And thus Gruden just passing it along. It was a little bit of laziness on the Raiders' part. Maybe they should have, they probably were thinking they weren't going to see Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. Another thing that came into play as well, don't forget, it was 1 week between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. It was a short gap. So you didn't have 2 weeks. So there wasn't as much time to prepare. The Bucs went, they beat Philadelphia and then they were quickly off to San Diego. So my memory on the tuck rule, year before, of course, in the snow in Foxborough. Here's the thing with the tuck rule. I understand why the rule is written that way because, it's if you say it's always that whenever your arm is moving forward, it's a pass, you do take guesswork of intent out of the equation. So I understand why the rule is written that way. Otherwise, you're saying, oh, is he tucking it or is he throwing it? If you just always say when it's going forward, it's a pass, you make it clear, black and white, that forward, pass, whether you're tucking it or throwing it. Just say forward motion, pass. So I get it. Raiders were just, they were on the business end of it. They'll complain about it, but the rule is the rule. So, Angry Mace. How did I come to Denver? 2002. Broncos had an opening on their website. I put in for it, had some good references, interviewed well, got the job. That's what started it. And then I just dove right in, started, from the moment I got here, just started collecting institutional knowledge. That's basically all it is. And eventually after a while, you have a lot of it. You've seen, maybe, and then you reach a point you've just been around for so long that you've got this Rolodex that you can just easily tap into, and you have all these memories, and you've seen all these things, and you've been at all these games, and you've been in the locker room so much, and when you see a jersey number, you can see 10 different guys. Like, you can go through and think about who are all these guys that wore number 12 or wore number 23 or whatever. Like, it's just, that's something institutionalized. Well, if you work for a team for a while, you do get institutionalized. You start thinking that things in that realm you accept as normal are not normal in the world outside. Bill Parcells has a phrase, "This game is not for the well-adjusted." And it's very accurate. Like, the NFL can be a really strange place in terms of, like, the hours that you have to keep, the demands of working in there. I'm actually pretty glad that I am where I am, which is I get to cover it. I get to be around it, but I get to be not in the building full time, that I get to be kind of outside of it here, that I get to go home and do my work in this space. I think sometimes when you are in that world too much, you can lose touch with reality a little bit. And I don't think that's the healthiest thing. I think I'm better on this side. Institutionalized. We all know, like, in Shawshank Redemption, when Red gets out of Shawshank and he's working at the grocery store, and he asks his boss if he can go to the bathroom, And his boss tells him, like, you don't have to ask my permission to go pee. But he'd gotten so used to only peeing when someone told him he could pee. He was institutionalized because you accept, like, you institutionalize means like you just like you accept that something is like normal that really isn't normal in the world at large, but you accept it and you can't exist with it, and your existence like relies upon it. And it's this kind of thing where being in the NFL, it's such a world. It is inside that world. It is so, frankly, different than the outside world that you can get institutionalized if you're not careful. So I'm glad I'm on the outside. I sometimes like to say that someday I'm going to write a book about the experiences of working for teams and then even covering the game that's called Get Another Guy, based on a phrase that Mike Shanahan would say, like if something goes wrong, if someone does something wrong and they need to be replaced, oh, we'll get another guy. As if you could just go to the tree out back and pluck another guy off of it, like you pluck an apple off a tree in the orchard. Oh, get another guy. It's that simple. Brooks was here. When did Cecil and I meet? Oh, I've known him for 20 years. Like when he was starting to do stuff around the Broncos, and he was down at the Senior Bowl and all that. I've known him for a long, long, long time. Yeah. Like my first Senior Bowl week was '04. Instantly became one of my favorite events. And '04, it was really cool. Back in those days, they had the practices at a couple of high schools, one in Mobile, one in Fairhope across the bay. And so you go from one to the other, and it was really kind of it was, even then, it was a smaller scale event, but it was, just, I'd never been before. And, just, you're actually just, you got 100 draft prospects right there, and you get to talk to them. And unfortunately, the Senior Bowl has kind of it's almost become too big, and the access has become too restricted. Back then it was just, you could pretty much grab guys whenever. It was fun. Like, some of the fun has been taken out of covering this. I kind of got in covering this on the very, very end of it being a little more wide open. Like I was here for the last year of training camp at Greenlee, when reporters could like literally just, we'd have lunch with the players. I was fortunate to have 2 years covering the Panthers '08 and '09 after I got laid off by the Broncos and went to work for the Panthers for a couple of years, because those 2 years were practices at Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and that was like it was back in Greeley, where you interacted with the players a lot more, and you'd eat in the same, media and everybody ate in the same dining hall as the players. And, sometimes like you'd be at one table and the players would be at the next table and all that. It was, so I'd eat with reporters, or sometimes I'd eat with players, or sometimes there'd be a coach at our table and stuff. And it was just like, those days were fun. And it's definitely not like that anymore. Oh, Johnny Bone. No, he actually wasn't with the organization at the time. They laid off I think it was like about 15 people. It was actually right after Ted Sundquist, the general manager at the time, got fired. I remember I got a phone call saying I had to be in at a meeting at 2:00, and I said, and I don't know, I think it was because Sundquist had gotten laid off. I had the feeling something was going down. And I actually asked my boss, I'm like, are you getting rid of me? Even though I'd had a great performance review, I just had a feeling something was going down. And he said, just be there at 2:00. And I'm like, yeah, you're getting rid of me, aren't you? And I got mad, and I hung up the phone, but I knew it was coming. Yeah. And yeah, there you go. That was it. And I mentioned this on social media a couple of hours ago, because someone responded to me like, oh, yeah, you don't love the team. Yeah, I don't love the team. I don't. I mean, and I worked for the team again for a few years in the 2010s, and I have a Super Bowl ring, and I'm proud of that. But I worked for the team. But I don't love it. I love my job. I love what I'm doing here. I love talking to you guys, and I love all of y'all, and I love covering sports. I mean, I love being at the games. I'm still excited about being at a game on Sunday. I I love spending time, creating something. I love spending time studying, studying game film. I love sitting down and rewatching a game. I love researching stats. I love I love being in the press box at a baseball game on a Friday night and, you know, keeping score, and then something pops in my mind and I'm diving into baseball reference when trying to like find something, some stat. I love, I love asking a question that makes an interview subject think, that you can see the gears turning in their head. But I don't love the Broncos, and I never will. When I worked for them again in the 2010s, it was a working relationship. And I would say the day I got laid off, at that point, everything work wise became transactional. That it's just work is work. Where I work, I put in the time, I do my work, you pay me. I am compensated for doing a job. I do love what I'm doing, but I put in my time, I do my work, you pay me. It is strictly transactional, and it's not, and that's it. So like I work, and every employer, and then I worked for the Panthers, and I enjoyed working there, but it was, I, it's a job. And I worked for the Broncos, and it's a job. And every employer, same thing. It's a job. It's where I worked. I mean, I know, like I was over at DNVR for 3 years, and they would say like refer to it as a family. Like, and I always was bothered by that. Family, your family is your family. Work is work. Because work is not family. Because work, they can fire you. They can lay you off. So that ain't family. It's like I hated the NFL commercials. Football is family. That's crap. Because if football is family, why do they cut 37 players at the end of the preseason? That ain't family. Family's family. That ad campaign was always stupid. Why do 1/3 of the teams fire their entire coaching staff every year? That's not family. And it's also like, and if you think of it this way with coaches, I mean, the coaches, they do their best, they do their job diligently with that team while they're there, but they don't have the same feeling for the team that you do. Because how many teams have they been through over the years? Because they get, coaches go from place to place to place to place to place. I mean, some of these coaches, if they hang on to gear that they've got, they look in their closet, they got windbreakers from 5 or 6 teams, right? So that's, I was I was a ringmaster last night. My family made me off last year. I'm in that I appreciate that. In that regard, I'm my dad's son. My dad was from North Carolina, and one of the things about him, now there were things he did not like about being from the South, and he did not like. He grew up in the 40s, and he was born in 43, and he grew up in the 50s. He did not like the racism there. I mean, as a kid, he didn't, you know, some of his best friends were black, and like it hit him on a deep level. Why can't they use the same water fountain that I do? And that influence, like, you want to know, like, where the way my dad saw the world, it was like put in right there. Like, that's just when he was a little kid. That's wrong. So it's one of the reasons why when he became an adult, you know, he went in the army and he went around the world. He went to Korea, he went to England, he went to Germany. But he had that, he certainly has politeness and he had politeness and manners about him, and definitely reserve, more reserve than I have. I can tend to kind of lose my cool a little bit sometimes, but yeah. How do I like living in the state of Colorado? This is getting personal now, and I kind of doesn't mind. I don't mind getting personal here, especially late in the show. I enjoy it. I wish it was by the water. That's what I miss. Because I was in Virginia for 11 years and then Florida for the rest of my childhood. Virginia, North Carolina, where a lot of my dad's side of the family was, like, that part of the country. I'd say, like, basically the Mid-Atlantic, like Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, that region, that's home for me. When I'm back in that part of the country, I feel like I'm at home. And of course, it's by the wall. It's closer to the water. I like being near the ocean. I like being able to get in the car and easily get to the water. And that's the thing I miss in Colorado. It's too far inland. If I could change anything, it would be, I'd like Colorado to be closer to the ocean. I just wish I didn't have to get on a plane to go to the water, because I get a lot of peace from being by the water. I was at, this summer for a few days, I was at Virginia Beach, and there was one, sometimes I'm just like I'm just in just kind of in the ocean on a boogie board or something. And there are sometimes I'll just kind of sit there as the waves are kind of lapping over me, and I'll just kind of look off into the distance and, over the horizon. I'll just get this profound sense of peace, or I'll just be sitting by the water, but, whether like over a hotel room looking over the ocean, or just kind of feeling the sea breeze, whatever. And that's something that gives me a great sense of peace. Or just when I lived in Seattle, I'd walk out to the edge of a pier and just kind of look off in the distance. You could see across Puget Sound to the Olympic Peninsula and the Olympic Mountains. And, there's something about being by the water that just gives me a lot of peace. So, and that's the one thing I wish we had in Colorado. That's the only thing I would change about Colorado. Other than that, it's a great place. And Chatfield Reservoir isn't enough. I think I just need I need something where it's like it's got to be a little farther over the horizon than that. Like, probably I spend part of the year in Wisconsin, and Lake Michigan gives me enough of that. Like, sometimes I'm in Milwaukee, and I find myself, going down by the shoreline in Lake Michigan in Milwaukee, and I'll just kind of, take a few minutes and kind of roll by there a little bit, and I get that piece from it as well. When I'm in Chicago, kind of, because I go to Chicago from time to time as well, kind of the same thing there too. So. And battling hurricanes every year. That's something you just get used to down there. It was funny because there were a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, my daughter and I were down in Florida at my parents' place, and the tropical storm was moving through, and my daughter hadn't experienced this. She was kind of scared about it, and I said, "Okay, look, we're gonna be okay." I just kind of explained it to her, and she eventually fell asleep. And then the next morning, I said, "You realize?" And it turned out that the center of the storm had literally passed over the house. And I said, while you were sleeping, the center of that storm literally passed right over you while you were sleeping. And I mean, obviously it wasn't a hurricane, but it was. I could tell like when I mentioned that, like you could tell like it got her a little. It demystified that for her because like she'd slept through that. That it wasn't as bad as it seemed. And I think that's, if you take the proper precautions and okay, this is, you know, when to get away, when to hunker down. You understand, like once you've lived down there, you know what to do. When there's lightning. Okay, the rule of the 5 second rule, right? Like you see lightning, and then if the thunder's within 5 seconds, it's within a mile. If it's 10 seconds, it's 2 miles. If it's 15 seconds, it's 3 miles. Like all these things when you're down in that part of the country. So. Mace, why was local media so optimistic until this last week? Everyone starts saying, hold your horse, they might start slow. I can't explain everyone else. I mean, I know I've talked about how they're trying to bring in some wide zone principles to the offense and to offensive line. I've said, look, getting those in might mean you're trying to figure things out for a while, and it might not work the way you want it to in the beginning. And of course, I've pointed to the slow starts in the past years as well as sort of evidence saying, okay, this might not be everything you want it to be right away. So I can't speak for the other local media in terms of what they're saying. So I can only talk about what I've said. And I know I've spoken specifically about the offensive line, and I've spoken specifically about them trying to put some wide zone principles into play, and how if you really, really want to get the max out of that, that you've got to be patient with it. And it's not going to be everything. It's not going to be it's not all they do, as you could see on Sunday, but it'll be part of it, but it takes some time. So. Everything in the South wants to hurt you. Insects the size of Volkswagens. That's also like Australia, I think. Come to Hawaii. Our B&B is open for you. I've been to Hawaii twice. I've been to Maui and I've been to Oahu. I'd like to get to the Big Island, and I want to get to Kauai. The next time I get to the islands, it's my goal is actually to get to the Big Island and to get to Kauai as well. I've been fascinated with Kauai in particular because the late Jake Scott, Super Bowl VII MVP, he had a fascinating life. So when he retired, he was an adventurer. Like, for example, he had an idea that he wanted to pee in the Arctic Ocean. And so, like, he kind of off-roaded and found a spot, and eventually he peed in the Arctic Ocean. Like, he kind of went all over the world. But then he found a place that he loved in Hanalei, I believe it was. And then he had a place, and that's basically where he spent most of his retirement. And I just I've been reading about that about 15 years ago, and I kind of got fascinated. I thought, I'd love to kind of visit out there at some point. Unfortunately, he's passed away since then, but he's the kind of guy who just kind of made his own path through life. So I'd love to get out there and experience that someday. So. Remember you doing the game show? I was trying to outsmart your Bronco knowledge. No, Lonnie, I lost once. I lost once on the center who had the most snaps to John Elway. And I believe I answered, I want to say I answered Billy Bryan, and I was wrong. And it wasn't Tom Nalen either. So anyway, like that was. cool. Appreciate that. Oh, by the way, and when I start talking about travel, I love how the comment kind of gets to the comment section gets to travel. The live chat, I should say, gets to travel as well. Call your mother because you don't know when the last time will come. I wish I had the Bear Bryant commercial at my disposal here. The phone commercial they did around about 1980, a couple of years, about 3 years before he died, where he talks about how when he would get recruits in at Alabama, first thing he would do is have them write a letter home to their parents because it was to remind them of the importance of staying in touch with their families. And the end of the commercial was supposed to say, "Have you called your mama today?" And at the end of it, and they left it in the commercial, he ad-libs, "I sure wish I could call mine." And it's, it just, I think it hit you see it, and it hits you hard. I'm sure sometimes mom watches this show. I had one of the more delightful Saturdays I've had in a long time. This past Saturday, because I got to spend a good portion of it on the phone with my mom, and we were talking about, sports and, football and life and all that. And it was, a lot of fun. So those things are really, really important, there was a talk show host, a sports talk host in Tampa, who one of the things he'd say when he signs off would be, "Tell someone you love them." What guard did he try to take? Was it? I don't know. Was it Tom Glassick or was it the other guard? I'm not sure. Maybe it was the other guard on the other side. It was an NE3. I'm blanking here, so forgive me for that. So anyway, Denver Football After Dark here on this Tuesday. This Tuesday morning here. This a long show, an introspective show here as we've gone into the wee small hours of the morning. Appreciate you being with me here as we started off talking about the Big Four free agent pickups, and as always, it goes in some interesting directions here. Not sure if there'll be a show Tuesday night because it's the Broncos' day off, but I know there'll be a show Wednesday night as we dive into all things Indianapolis Colts and game prep. So just stay tuned. There may be a show on Tuesday night. That kind of depends how I'm feeling, how the day is going. I'll let you know. Anyway, so appreciate you being here for this edition of Denver Football After Dark. Like, comment, share, subscribe if you enjoy this kind of Broncos chat, or this just freewheeling chat, as it were, kind of going in all sorts of directions as it tends to here in the wee small hours of the morning. I'm going to have a video piece at some point tomorrow here on this channel, a shorter piece, recapping some stuff from the last couple of days. So be on the lookout for that here as well. They'll be on this channel. It'll also be on the Denver Sports Facebook channel and their social channels as well. So make sure you catch that because I've got the short form stuff as well as the long form stuff here as well. And of course, the Broncos will be back at it on Wednesday after their Tuesday day off. So make sure you catch all that, and appreciate you being here. Until next time, take care, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.